Parshas Nitzavim, Tavshin Ayin Beis. Nice to see a lot of our old crowd back here this week. Everybody looks so anxious to be here by the shir. Nice to see. It's interesting to note that this year, even though it is not a Shana Me'uberes, even though it is not a leap year this year, we will still be laning only Parshas Nitzavim this week. This is not to say that you should be that ecstatic that the laning Kriyas Torah will probably only take a few minutes this week, but the reason being that since there's a Shabbos in the days this year, since there's a Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and we need to lane a parsha between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, so we have to split up the parshas of Nitzavim and Vayelech. Therefore, we're able to concentrate our minds this Shabbos before Rosh Hashana on Parshas Nitzavim, and there really are a lot of lessons to be learned from Parshas Nitzavim. We're going to try to focus on one lesson that the Nesivos Shalom brings out this week, one other lesson from the Parsha. We'll try to combine and give some really, really good advice that you can take with you to use this Rosh Hashana. Being that we only have a couple of days before Rosh Hashana, everybody knows that when you come a couple of days before Rosh Hashana, you start to get these feelings. We all start to feel. If you have any sort of neshama inside yourself, every Jewish person, every Yid that has a neshama starts to feel something that Rosh Hashanah is coming. And everybody feels it in a different way, but there's something that we feel inside that Rosh Hashanah is really on its way. And part of the feeling that we have is we feel this need to reconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes some people feel it more than others, that we have strayed so far, we have strayed a little bit, we've strayed a lot, but we all have this feeling that we need now, in the next few days, before Rosh Hashanah, before we stand, Yom Adin, before we stand before the Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we need to reconnect. And I heard a beautiful part this week, and I was actually at two different shiurim this week, and I heard the same idea of both of the shiurim, and I want to begin by talking a little bit about that, because I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thought, and something which every single one of us can think about and actually use coming up to Rosh Hashanah now, these last few Yemei HaSlichas before Rosh Hashanah gets here. The Gemara, Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Yud Zayin Amud Beis, tells us a very interesting thing, that there is a bris krusa. There is a covenant that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what is this covenant? What is this bris? There's a bris krusa, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells us, that if we say the Yud Gimel Midas, if you say the Shlosh Midas, when one davens with the Yud Gimel Midas, she'einon chayzos reika. There's a bris krusa. It's a covenant. It's a sort of a promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, that if you daven with the Yud Gimel Midas, just like by the Klal Yisrael in the Midbar, they did the chet of the Egel, and after the Egel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they said there was the Yud Gimel Midas, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Michael Klal Yisrael. There's a bris krusa forever. You daven with the Yud Gimel Midas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to listen to you. Einon chazis reikam. There's an interesting Rabbeinu Bachia on this. It's actually it's told that this Rabbeinu Bachia is brought down in a few different svarim. And Rabbeinu Bachia says that this bris krusa that the Gemara mentions, this bris krusa works where and when does it work? It works always, it works every time, unless a person has averas. And averas are ma'akev, this covenant of the Yud Gimel Midas working. So everybody, it's a bon kasha, peldik kasha, I see it on everybody's face right here. When else are you supposed to say the Yud Gimel Midas? When should you say it, if not when, unfortunately, people do averas, Klal Yisrael does averas, Klal Yisrael did averas. When are you supposed to say the Yud Gimel Midas, if not when you have chatoim? So what does it mean? What is Rabbeinu Bachia saying that it works unless a person has chatoim? That's the only time that's what we need, the Yud Gimel Midas. What's pshat in that? So it's a very, very interesting way of looking at this memra. And I heard it this week from a couple of different people in a few different shiurim. but I heard from the original thought. This thought was from Rav Aaron Walken. He's a Rav here in Lakewood, and he said a very, very beautiful thing. There's a klal that a person is supposed to emulate the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we know, the Gemara says, Mahu Rachel, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has mercy, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has several different midos, so too a Yid is supposed to follow the midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Walken said a very, very interesting word. When Rabbeinu Bachya says that Averis are ma'akev the Yud Gimel Midas, what does he mean? It doesn't mean that if a person has any Avera, the Yud Gimel Midas are not going to work. They worked when they had the Chet HaEgel. That's what it was made for. It was made for a person with Averis. The Averis that it doesn't work when a person doesn't keep to those Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person says, Hashem, Hashem, Kel, Rachel, B'chanan. You say all those midos, and you yourself don't act that way. If another Yid does something wrong to you, and you stand up for yourself, and you're not a Rachel, and you're not a Chanun, and you don't follow them, those midos, you don't follow those midos which are in the Yud Gimel midos. If you have those kind of averos, then the Yud Gimel midos don't work for that. A regular chait, other chatoim, that's what it's made for. But if you have those chatoim where in yourself you're cold, you're not a rachlam, you're not a chanun, that's when Rabbeinu Bachya tells us that it doesn't work. Then it can't work. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at you and says, 1 second, saying Hashem, Kel, Rachlam, V'chanan, you yourself don't hold of those things. You yourself are not interested in those. You're not interested in those midos. You yourself don't hold of it. If you don't hold of it, why would I? That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the person. And that is a type of Avera. If you have bad midos, if you have those midos, you refuse to go, the halachta b'drachav, you refuse to be mahu rachlam, apatorach, if you refuse to have those midos, then the Yud Gimel midos are not going to help you. And be'emes, when we come to slichas, it's interesting. You say sometimes it can be malamed chus. People come to the slichas. And you say the slichas, how many times do we say over? I don't know if anybody knows the count here. How many times during slichas? And this year we say more slichas than almost every other year, right? And how many times are we saying we have the schus to say Yud Gimel Midas over and over? Many people have no idea what they're saying in Yud Gimel Midas. Certainly they have no idea what they're saying in the words of the piyutim of the slichas. Many people have no idea. But this is something to think about. You think about, someone told me use malamed schus on the fact that people have no idea what they're hearing and what they're saying when they say the slichas. Because it says at the beginning of slichas, kedal mucharashim. We're coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're out of ideas. We're coming like poor people. He says that we're just begging you. We don't even know what we're saying, but we know we have no other address. We have no kedal mucharashim. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. We're desperate. We need something. We come banging on the door of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say things we don't even know what we're saying. So he was trying to say, this Rabbi, I once heard from him, he was trying to say that, maybe it's not so terrible when people don't understand the slichas, even though it's more like you're being like a parrot, you're just saying the words that are in, you don't understand what you're saying, but you know what? We're kedal mucharashim, we're so desperate. So at least the one thing that we should try to understand, if you can't understand all the piyutim, the one thing you could try to understand is what we just said about the Yud Gimel Midos, that Mahu Racham, we have to try to emulate the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu like that. So the Nesivos Shalom brings down the Maimar Chazal that tells us that when it comes to Rosh Hashana, there's a very, very interesting. Now I know that that's not my radio going. My solar radio is down. It's someone's fire radio's on. Okay, so if you want to know what's doing in the fire department, try to listen in with me. There's a Maimar Chazal. The Maimar Chazal says that when a time Rosh Hashana comes around, all the tshuva and all the tikkunim that you're supposed to do should be over already. In other words, Elul, Yemei HaSlichas, that's the time for tshuva and tikkunim. However, when it comes to Rosh Hashana, we have one job, we have one tafkid. The tafkid of Rosh Hashana is to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu and every one of our Eivarim. We're supposed to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not meant for tshuva and all these things, is for Elul. And even for Aseret Yemei Tshuva, which is after Rosh Hashana. But when it comes to Rosh Hashana, you're supposed to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the idea. And with Amos, we say it in the Tfilos. We say, Maloich al kol ha'olam kuloi. It's not about fixing your avodas. It comes to Rosh Hashana. It's brought down in the Sefer Priya Aretz. Nesivos Shalom brings down from that Sefer that the very word Shana, and this is an idea for everybody for Rosh Hashana, the very word Shana is similar to the word Shinui. On Rosh Hashana, Dr. Nesivos Shalom brought down from the Sefer Pri Haaretz that the tafkid of a person when it comes to Rosh Hashana is that you have to be changed. You have to have Shina. And he talks about different times of the calendar that are misugel for a person to change. We know Hashana is Shinoi, Rosh Chodesh is Chidush, is renewal. All these type of things. He discusses different things, different times that are misugel for a person to change. And what do? When we come to Rosh Hashana, we accept that Kadosh Baruch Hu is a melech. We need to accept the Kadosh Baruch Hu in a real way. It has to be a real change. We can't continue on the way we were before. All those things to do tshuva and everything, that's for Elul. But when it comes actually to Rosh Hashanah, you have to change in this way. You have to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said that's shot in the pasuk at the beginning of this week's parsha. The pasuk says, Atem Nitzavim Hayoim Kolchem. Many of you know, the Mefarshim bring down that the word Hayoim at the beginning of the parsha, many Mefarshim say that Hayoim, you are standing here today, Hayoim is referring to Rosh Hashanah. And we continue right after that, La'avrucha bebris Hashem lekecha, and we said that Hashem lekecha kaireis imcha Hayoim. There's a renewal. We have to renew the bris, we have to renew this connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Rosh Hashanah is really all about. A new bris, a new connection, a new understanding that we want to be. We have to be mavatal ourselves totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Dr. Nesivos Shalom, when you're nischadish this kesher, when you do put this kesher back, when you're nischadish this kesher, then you're becoming davuk b'Hashem. Nesivos Shalom tells us that when a person is davuk b'Hashem, that holds away all the din. We're trying to always weigh rachamim and din. We want rachamim for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the more davuk a person is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more he holds away the din. I want to finish up with an explanation. It's beautiful, a beautiful explanation on this Gemara. The Gemara says, Masechet Rosh Hashanah Tezayin Amud Beis, and this is a very famous Gemara. Everybody knows that Shloisha Sfarim Niftachim b'Rosh Hashanah. There are 3 Sfarim open on Rosh Hashanah. I just thought of another word from the Nesivos Shalom, which I'll tell you on this, but it says there are 3 Sfarim open on Rosh Hashanah. Tzadikim Gemurim, the Gemara says, Nichtavim v'nechtavim la'alta l'chaim. Someone's a tzadik Gemar. Right away, he's written out l'chaim tovim. He's written out for a good year. Rishoyim Gemurim, if someone chas v'shalom is a Rasha Gemar, we say la'alta chas v'shalom l'misa, that he's written in chas v'shalom for something not good. And Beinanim Tuliyim v'Oimdim. Beinanim are standing between the tzaddikim and Rishoyim somewhere, and then we know Aseret Yimei Tshuva and Yom Kippur. Zok Nesivos Shalom. How do we know? What tells us that at tzaddik gomor, that right away, where is this? What's the practical way of knowing that tzaddik gomor? He says, you know what? It's based on what we just said. He said because a person has to realize that his lifeline, his way of life, his way of staying alive, his lifeline is an oxygen tank, is an oxygen line straight to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah, that is our oxygen. Tzaddikim Gemurim, he understands this. So it's not an upshot that there's no lumdus over here. It's a very practical thing. When you are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you accept the bris of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you decide that you want to be makusher to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so your lifeline is connected. Your lifeline is connected. Therefore, you're written la'alta l'chaim. You're written in for a good year. And this other word I thought of Nesivos Shalom. Nesivos Shalom says that these svarim that are open on Rosh Hashanah don't only refer to this. I've seen it brought down from Nesivos Shalom before. He says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they have 3 svarim open, and what those svarim are open, they're waiting for you to write down what you want to be this year. You know what you were last year. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. You know. We know what you do after tshuva. We know how much you want to shtayt. We know how much you want to be better. But the 3 svarim are open. The 3 svarim are niftachim for you to write down where you want to be next year, what you want to do. Let us all realize that this is the kesher we want to have. That this bris krusa of Yud Gimel Midos is contingent upon us improving our midos, contingent upon us doing those midos, becoming like a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Rachel B'Chanan, Mit Hashem. We should all be zoicha. If we take this to heart and we learn this lesson, we should all be zoicha to a ksiva v'chasim and toiva and a good yard.